Hey everyone, it's Lynda. Thanks for joining me tonight. So tonight our topics is going to be on fear and worry. And I read this a while back, but it stuck with me that fear and worry are the robbers of life. And I even posted that one time. It's very true. They really do take away a huge part of your life if you are spending a lot of your energy and time on worrying and a lot of anxiety. Another good one is that the robbers of time can be your past and your future. So again, if you're worrying about the past, which there's no need to because it's already done with, or you're having a lot of anxiety about the future, worrying about things that haven't happened either, it really does rob you of your joy in the present moment. And so that's why, I talk a lot about living in the present moment, trying to be more mindful of those things. So let's go ahead and start. Again, thanks for joining me. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments below and I'll get back with you. Oftentimes when we are worrying about something, it's definitely usually about something in the future. One, we don't really have control over it because it hasn't happened. And two, we're usually conjuring up the worst case scenario, like the worst thing that could possibly happen on whatever it is that we're thinking of. So, say you are not a social person and you are going to some party and you're just like dreading going to this party because you're like, oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to feel like talking to people. I'm not going to know anybody. I'm not going to have any fun. Oh, they're not even going to have the food I like there. On and on, right? You're conjuring up all these things in your mind of things that could potentially go wrong or things that you're just not going to like. And 9 times out of 10, and almost 10 times out of 10, when we actually go through with whatever it is that we're so worried or nervous about, by the time we get there and get through that event or whatever it may be, usually we actually have a little bit of fun. And it was never as bad as we thought it was going to be, right? I'm sure we've all experienced that a time or two. I know I have. So why do we do this? Well, easy answer is because we're all human, right? So we're all going to worry. We're all going to have a little bit of fear, and that's completely normal. Especially fear. I mean, fear is something that is innate in us to keep us alive. So, you're at the Grand Canyon, you're going to make sure you don't go too close to the ledge. I mean, that's an honest fear that we should have because your brain's trying to keep you safe. So that's completely normal. Same with worry. If you have an interview coming up, a recital, a big game coming up, things that are just kind of normal things in life that are going to happen. Again, these are very normal responses. But what's normal about them is that we know the event's going to take place. We might be a little nervous in the beginning, like anticipating that event, whether it's a recital or an interview. And then when it's over, it's over. That ceases, that worry, that nervousness goes away. Like I say, when it becomes a problem is when it's completely overwhelming to you and like kind of taking over your life. That's when it becomes a problem. So, why do we do these things to ourselves? Well, it's funny because I just read a book called, what is it? Sorry. What happened to you? Name of the book, What Happened to You? And so we do want to ask ourselves, like, gosh, what did happen to me that's making me react in these ways, like to the extreme of worry and fear? So I can give you some examples, of course, from my personal life. So sadly, I lived with high anxiety for a lot of years, even decades. The saddest part about this is I had no idea that that's how I was living. I did it for so long and was so good at it that I just attributed it to that's just my life, that's normal, that's my personality, that's how I am. I just must be very high strung and always striving to like make sure everything was perfect or that I was doing the best I could at all times. I just kind of made excuses really, but I had no insight into that is what was wrong with me. I was living with that high anxiety and I mean to the max. I mean, it got so bad. It finally took getting really bad to where I had to even seek medical attention before I realized you got to do something different and calm your body and yourself down or you're going to end up getting very sick. So, that's what it takes for a lot of us is usually a crisis or something really bad for us to kind of sit back and realize and take a moment and analyze gosh, why have I been living like this with this high anxiety? So like I said, I'll give you an example, and this is just a little one, but I would, just driving to work, I would always want to make sure I was there on time, no matter what. So of course I was gonna say like, oh my gosh, there's 1,000 things that could happen. There could be detours, there could be a car accident, the weather, the traffic, I'll get caught by a train, sometimes that's 10 or 15 minutes. So I would leave really early to go to work to make sure I was always getting there on time, because I thought I was just being a good employee and like planning all these scenarios to make sure I got there on time, when really we know this is ridiculous. Like, nobody cares. We all care that you just get there safely. If you're 5 minutes late, you're 5 minutes late. It didn't matter. Now, for me, it was a huge deal. So if I thought I was going to even be a couple minutes late, I would like call my boss, be like, I think I'm gonna be late. Like, I'm sitting in this traffic. And I mean, they didn't care, but to me, it was like a big deal. And I kid you not, my heart would be racing the entire time I was driving. I would just, I had like this really even more anxiety than normal, just sitting in this traffic for no reason. I mean, I was doing this to myself. And again, I thought this was normal. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until it got so bad that I had to, like I said, step back and say, what can I do differently? So, like I say, this is normal. So why do these things happen to us? Like, where does this all start? And that could be another topic, but, and sometimes you might not know where it all starts. What I can tell you is that our brains are like little computers. So when you are infant to about 2 years old, your brain waves are in delta waves, which is very slow. So like when you are sleeping, we're in delta waves. Then from about 2 to 6-ish, you're in theta waves. Theta waves is a very creative state. It's a very low wave, brain wave, but you're pretty creative. And in these waves, you're very susceptible to what's going on around you, and you're soaking it all in, and you're learning what life is like, what it feels like to be safe and fed and clothed and comforted and all these things. You're learning all these things even before communication. Then 7 to 12, you're in alpha wave, and that's a little bit higher frequency, but still a calm frequency of brain wave. And then we know that your brain, actually your prefrontal cortex, actually your logical brain, doesn't form completely until you're about 25. So we have a lot to grow, right, with our brains when we're dealing with this worry and anxiety. So when I was doing the one-on-one therapy with people, I would oftentimes have to remind them that, remember, up until about 25, your brains actually are not fully formed. So your logical brain is the last one to form. So as you're growing up as a child, things may have happened to you, good or bad, but typically some things that were more traumatic that happened. You didn't have the true capacity to deal with it in that moment. So you really have to, we worked a lot on giving yourself a lot of compassion being a child, because you literally didn't have the coping skills and ability and capability to deal with that at the time. So, we always say that please have a lot of compassion for yourselves. Fears may be based on past experiences, past events, or even just hearing stories from other people. So, if you think about it, maybe you heard something, maybe you were involved in something, a car accident or something scary that happened to you. And so maybe now, even though it happened years ago, maybe today you miss out on a lot of things because of that fear. So for instance, maybe some people have never been on a roller coaster because they were scared or heard a story about something about a roller coaster. Maybe you've never been on an airplane because you're scared of hearing about crashes in the past. Or maybe you've never been on a boat because you learned about somebody possibly drowning. So, these things are based on fear. And again, whether they probably didn't happen to you directly, but sometimes you still feel that way. I have an example. I met with someone who had a real irrational fear that her husband, every time he left the house, she feared he was going to die. And she knew logically that it was an irrational thought. However, because her mother had passed away in a very tragic way that really was traumatizing for her, she could voice, I know that when my husband leaves the house, like 99.9% chance he's going to come back and everything's going to be fine. However, I still have this really real fear that something's going to happen to him every time he leaves the house. And so why is that? It's because our logical brain, we can logic that out, like, no, we know everything's going to be okay. It's because it's not a logical problem. That's why. So the reason is because it's an emotional problem. She had something very traumatic happen to her that involved the death of her mother. And so because that hasn't healed and she hasn't really dealt with that, it was moving on and affecting her today. And that's what trauma does. It sticks with you and it interferes into your daily life, where it could have been something that happened 30 years ago, but somehow you're still dealing with it today, whether it's a trigger or however that may come about for you. So anyways, that's just why, is because it's not a logical problem, it's an emotional problem. So try to remember that as you're dealing with things, that why is it that I know this to be true, or I know this not to be true, but somehow I'm still battling with it emotionally? It's because it's not a logical problem. And that will kind of help, hopefully make you feel better too, and say, well, this is why I'm battling, because I'm trying to logic it out, and that's not the way to fix the problem. Let's see. So how do we fix this? How do we get rid of our fears and worries? I mean, well, you know me, so I think ART is a good way of dealing with it. One, because it's fast. Two, because you don't have to say much about whatever it is you would like to work on. And three, because we work with the bottom-up approach, which means you work with the emotional side of your brain in fixing the issue versus your logical brain. So we're not what they call top-down, we're like a bottom-up approach, which is more realistic and truly more healing for someone, and really quickly. That's the other part. That's why I really love art, because you can go, people go to therapy for years, and you really shouldn't unless you're going for multiple things. Like if you have one issue, hopefully you're resolving that within a couple of months. With ART, you can resolve it in an hour if that's something you would like to do for one trauma, one issue. The other thing is, there's other things you can do, like gratitude, meditation, yoga, dancing, things that actually get things out of your body. And I wanted to read something to you here. So someone once said, courage contains magic and genius. So if you face the situation fearlessly, then there's nothing to face. So, in other words, how do we get rid of our fears and how do we get rid of our worry? We actually have to face it head on. And chances are, just like in the very beginning when I was talking about going to that party you didn't want to go to, or doing some kind of social event you didn't want to, it's very similar. You just got to do it. And chances are it's never as bad as you thought it out to be. It's never as bad as we conjured up. It's never as bad as, all the things that you could possibly think are going to go wrong. Usually nothing goes wrong, and usually we end up having a decent time, or we end up feeling good about whatever it is that we did. I hear this a lot with people going to the gym. This is a sidebar, but they say, I don't want to go, but once I'm there, I feel great, and I'm glad I was there, I'm glad I did it, and when they leave, it just makes their day. They feel accomplished, they feel like they did something healthy for themselves, and a little bit of self-care in there too. So it's just a matter of doing it. First step is probably recognizing it, right? Because I didn't recognize that for years, sadly. I was constantly living in this pretend future that never happened, or I was just worrying about possibly things in the past as well. So it just really is a waste of your time, your joy, your life. You really are missing out on the present moment. And for me, I think I've shared before, I really felt like I missed out on a lot of my child's elementary childhood years, because I was always just so much in my head with constant worries. And, I couldn't concentrate on anything else really. And so, I can't feel bad now about that. I've moved on from that, but there was a while where I felt really guilty about that. So, the other thing I wanted to say quickly is that doubt and fear poison your mind and your body. And so again, it's just that fear, doubt, worry, all those things really take a toll on your body. So if you're thinking it, it comes out somehow in your body. It creates disease. It also attracts some of the similar things that you're worried of, because you're thinking about it constantly. You're going to see it more often. So also the reverse is true. So if you're thinking about really good things, you're going to notice those as well. So if you set your mind on things such as gratitude, you're going to start noticing that throughout your day. But if you continue to set your mind on all the things you got to worry about, the bills you got to pay, the places you got to be, the reports you got to do, I mean, then guess what? You're going to feel like your life is full of all of those things because that's what you're concentrating on. So literally whatever you put your attention towards is what you're going to put your energy on. So the more, if you're thinking more positively, your energy is going to shift a little bit. If you're thinking more negatively, it's also going to shift that direction. So I lived negatively pessimistic for so long. It was terrible. So now that I've kind of found this new life with healing through art therapy, at least for me, has been almost a miracle. It's completely changed my life around. That's why I'm so passionate about it. I try to tell as many people as I can about it because it truly, truly does help, and it has a trickle-down effect in your life, not just, you know, healing the one trauma, but when you do heal the one trauma, I mean, it's like a brand new day. Your eyes just open up. I mean, the next day looks brighter outside, I kid you not. I mean, you start noticing things, you start living in the present moment. It's a life that you didn't know you could have, but definitely we can all have that positive, more grateful outlook of a life and really enjoy our present moment. Well, thank you all for listening tonight, and please, any questions, let me know, and I look forward to seeing you next week.